if you give that theanine with caffeine, what you often see is someone would have a sense of much more calm energy. So they get the good things of caffeine, but in a much more calmer subjective state where they're able to stay focused longer and be more productive. Like one of the things I think of with high doses of caffeine, it gives us the sense that we're doing a lot more, but we're often doing a lot of those things less accurately.
Mhm.
So theanine helps balance that. And then other things that happen, or that were then later added on or experimented with had often to do with the dopamine system, right? So dopamine, most people know that is the neurotransmitter that's all about reward. But really what dopamine is, it's something that's secreted in advance of the reward that tells our body we think it's likely that the investment of resources you're going to put into this is
Yeah.
going to be rewarding. So let's do it, right? So it's about motivation and guessing about the future and things like that. But that system ends up being super important for motivation and productivity and learning. And the other one is acetylcholine. And acetylcholine is made from something in our diet called choline. But acetylcholine is all about neuroplasticity and attention and learning and memory. And they're wrapped up together because to learn and remember, we have to focus our attention first.
Mm.
And so, like a quick way to think about it is that idea of 10,000 hours. So, for listeners, you've probably heard this idea we have to invest quite a bit of time often to become expert. The thing that's not often mentioned is it has to be focused attention. Otherwise, we're not going to get much better, right? We need feedback because we always need that feedback loop. And then we need acetylcholine because acetylcholine is what allows the brain's landscape to be altered to allow for the learning and memory. So I always think of it as without acetylcholine, 10,000 hours, even invested wisely, would be largely wasted. So we just need more of these neurotransmitters and these other substances often if we're going to get more from the brain for whatever we're investing in, whether it's our job or school, you name it. And so, what we did at the Qualia brand over time, going back to 2015, we just started experimenting by building lots of these recipes, so to speak, and testing them out till we found one that seemed really reliably to help people in those big areas, that sense of mental energy, focus, and motivation.
How big of an impact in your experience, and I know, I mean, I have some idea what the answer likely is, but what I've come to learn for myself is that sleep is really important. I don't need a lot of it. So, in other words, for me, my sweet spot is 6 to 6.5 hours. I occasionally will sleep 7. I could count on one hand the number of times I'll sleep 8 hours in a night over the course of a year. Now, I don't wake up to a alarm clock ever, and I'm pretty consistent. If I'm asleep by 11, I'm gold, and I'm going to get out of bed, and I'm up and at it usually by 5:30. Now, if that gets disrupted and I end up occasionally because of the nature of sometimes what I do, because I'm in the West Coast and I'm dealing with individuals on the East Coast or Central Canada, my time zones, I'm up really early sometimes for meetings, etc. Now the point is that I find at some point caffeine is just the worst thing for me in terms of if I've only had, let's say, 4 hours of sleep or even 5 hours, a cup of coffee, and then after that, the worst thing I can do is add caffeine to it. But how important is sleep? And when you consider what you just talked about, does that cause disruption to sleep? How much even does the endless scrolling that many get caught in, myself included, have been part of that? How disruptive is that to our sleep and even how our brain functions, given that we're looking for that dopamine, whether we are aware of it or not? I don't know if there's a direct question in there other than, when we talk about sleep, what are some of the things that you've learned about sleep?
Yeah. So sleep's a foundational piece, right? So I think there's our hypothalamus is part of our brain that really I think of as what controls survival. So what you would see there is core survival things like how much we eat, so appetite, thirst regulation, body temperature regulation, sleep needs, how much body fat we carry, our body clock, they're all regulated in that area. So sleep is, one of those foundational things um, that we need. And then the way kind of sleep works is the same as any of those things that are self-regulated. So that part of our brain largely decides how much sleep we need and tries to make sure we attain it. And there's differences. Like, if you hear 8 hours of sleep is what we need, I don't think that's even an accurate average. It's probably somewhere closer to 7 to 7.5. But some people need more, some people
Mm.
a little bit less, a few people, a small percent, much less. So those are usually thought of as short sleepers, people that, maybe 4.5 or 5 hours, they're fully restored. So it varies. But what tends to be true is most people don't budget enough time for sleep.
Mhm.
Meaning maybe not 90%, but well more than half. And that would perform better if they just allowed even more time to sleep. And I think one of the things is what you do, right? Let's make sure that we don't need to wake with an alarm and cut sleep off somewhere in the middle of a sleep cycle, because
Mhm.
sleep comes in cycles that will usually have 4 or 5 sleep cycles over the course of a night, and each cycle will start off in deep sleep and then end up in dreaming sleep, and by the end of the night it's mostly the dreaming sleep, which is why we often are in the midst of a dream if our alarm goes off. So I think that would be one of the things is you know, um, start to go to bed earlier until you can wake naturally without an alarm, and see if that makes a difference in how you perform. But it usually makes a profound difference, and huge impact often on metabolic health, like weight, blood sugar, things like that.
Mhm.
And so, oh, I was just going to say, and
Yeah.
nootropics, the ones I've been talking about, like Qual Mind, is a beginning of the day thing. And what
Mhm.
often happens if we start the beginning of our day better, we end up having better sleep as a result.